Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amanda McMaster, SIPA's Managing Director, and on behalf of my colleague Matt Kinsman of Connective and myself, I am pleased to invite you to today's webinar, The Ever-Evolving Future of Event Contracts and Face-to-Face Meetings. We know that many of you are dealing with complex issues right now in your own virtual events, so we're excited to share this presentation to help you as you're navigating what comes next, help you with contracts, and help you to create some strong relationships with your event venues that are going to assist you in the long run. I'd like to turn it over now to Leslie Davidson of Davidson Direct, who is going to be facilitating our program today. Leslie.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. And I also want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you for joining this great webinar that is brought to you, as Amanda said, by SIPA and Connective. So I am a consultant who specializes in producing, marketing, and managing and recruiting speakers for webinars like this one, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's event. During today's event, you're going to be in listen-only mode. You're going to be streaming the sound, but if you have any problems listening that way, you can call in and listen by phone using the access information that you got in your confirmation email. Or if you're logged in now, you can see that also at the bottom of the page you're looking at. You'll need your conference ID and PIN, and if you do call in, be sure to mute the speakers on your computer so you don't hear the sound coming both from your phone and your computer. If you're still having sound problems or any other technical issues, you can send a message through the tech support window, and someone will help you out as soon as they can. If you have questions for today's speakers, you can submit them at any time during the webinar. You can use the Q&A box either to the right or below the slides, depending on the size of your screen. And all questions that you submit will be anonymous, so you can ask whatever questions you would like to ask. You can also download a copy of the slides from today's presentation. You'll also find those at the bottom of your screen under Handouts. And if you'd like to increase the size of the slides, just click on the full screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of your viewer. Oh, actually, I think it might be in the lower left-hand corner of your viewer. Some of the slides may be hard to see, but you can download and review them later if you need to. You will lose the ability to ask a question, but if you click Escape, you can go back to regular screen, and then you'll see the Q&A and Support tab buttons, and you'll be able to use those as well. And finally, we're recording this webinar, so we'll make it available on demand in our library next week. So if you miss any portion of the presentation, you'd like to watch it again, or you want to play it for other staff members, you'll have the ability to do that. And we'll send out a link to the recording just as soon as it's available. And now on to today's session. Our speaker for today is Kelly Finney. She's a senior event strategist with Moritz Global Events, which she joined in 2003 after 15 years in the hospitality industry. She started her career in 1988 with Marriott International. And now, without further ado, Kelly, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining today. I do want to also reiterate that, I know that probably a lot of you are facing the same thing that I'm facing every single day, and really negotiating through this tough time through COVID with contracts and force majeure and differences of opinions on what all of that means in liability ends. So that's really kind of the focus of what my presentation is, in really taking what I've learned from my industry, my company, and my experience in navigating this to help share some tools and resources that I use really to help me get to that happy medium where my client is happy and the hotel is happy as we can all be. So my first topic. Here we go. So I think what is really on everybody's mind is, when will live meetings start to recover? So this is a quote from the president of lodging data provider STAR. In the hotel world, we rely upon this STAR report like the Bible. It tells us years and years worth of history, and just kind of, as corny as it sounds, slices and dices that data in so many ways that the hotel industry really relies upon this when we go through things like 9/11 or in 2008 with the recession. COVID seems to be a completely different animal, but yet, we know one thing, data is the only thing we can rely upon. So really what the latest thing, and this was as of last week, in the beginning, they really anticipated demand would recover from 2019 levels by the middle of 2023. And it really sounds like that's not really what we all want to hear. But the positive news is by the end of 2021, they are estimating that we will be recovered by a little bit over 80%. So I think that is really encouraging. I put the link to their website. There's so much data on that STAR website. You can become a member if you want to become a member, or there's many YouTube links, lots of useful information that if you would like to explore that, I would highly recommend to go to their site. So any data gurus out there? So I put this screen on there, and I don't want to get into a bunch of data in this call. It really is about sharing tools and information and things of that nature. So I did do a different handout that you will be able to download that has so much data on there. It's got COVID data, it's got recovery data on there, purely data. As far as is from what we see it. In that handout, you'll notice I put it together, but a lot of this data is coming from the ALHI group, which is headed up by Michael Dominguez, and he is a huge influence in the hospitality industry for many, many years. He was a senior VP, chief executive sales officer for MGM worldwide. So he's got some great information. He is very, very middle of the line. He's not on the hotel side. He's not on the client side. He just looks at the data and tries to predict when we can all get back to business. So good news, meetings are happening. I hear about this every day. Merit's Global Events, which is my company, not my company, but I'm a part of that company. We've got 3,000 employees when we are fully operating, and we are all connected in listening to what meetings are happening. We've all got them going in certain cities. So the average size is 50 to 150. Everything is a hybrid event right now. Nothing is 100% live. Some of the helpful things is, how they got to having the meeting and making sure it's safe is, to have attendees, take and sign a questionnaire, ask the questions. And I think we're all dealing with this, whether it be a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment. We can't really enter the building fully until we say, no, we don't have a temperature. Let's take a temperature check. Or, have we been in contact with anybody with COVID? So just really trying to get that data if you're going to have a meeting. Some of the benefits or some of the highlights for successful meetings is working with the hotel to kind of group attendees on same floors, so you don't have the individual traveler mixing with your group, doing a nightly curfew, temp checks, of course. I thought it was really, this one particular meeting that I did a case study on, did color-coded dots on the badges, so to make sure that everybody knew that that person was checked that day. Wristbands, you'll see later, you'll see in the takeaway that I have different color wristbands for someone who's not concerned and they're willing to hug, or you got the person who's doing the elbow bump, or you got someone saying stay away, like different colors, just so everybody is respected. I thought also a neat thing was really assign seating in each meeting room, so everybody goes back to the same seat, so you're not having to wash down everything within a 15-minute break. So this is one of the meetings I was talking about that I did a case study. It was a biotech company, 150-person meeting in August at the Fairmont Austin. So this is actually a live photo. This isn't something that was downloaded off the internet. This was something that was just kind of shared. And you can see this particular company, it was a launch that they did. So they spent the extra money, and you can see that probably isn't very cheap to get everybody kind of sitting in their own pods, but kind of a unique, interesting takeaway. And I will also say, so the data takeaway that I also have a takeaway with lots of visuals when it comes to the meetings that are happening. So it's got visuals from what does check-in look like? What does housekeeping look like? What do room sets? And it's got a couple different pictures of room sets. So if you're a visual person and you want to see what those meetings are looking like, I would highly recommend that you download that takeaway. So financial liability, this is something I am talking quite a bit with my clients about for 2021. 2020, pretty successful in getting meetings moved to future years, future dates, pushing it out with extremely little liability. I think in total, I was able to save my clients over $3 million in liability. And I think the only cancellation that was paid was maybe about $40,000, and it was because they canceled into 2021 just too early. But that still was a huge savings because the full cancellation would have been about 400,000. So proactiveness, go if you've got contracts out for 2021, you're going to want to go back to those hotels now, sooner than later, and talk about guest room attrition, food and beverage performance, especially first quarter. What I am seeing out there, and this goes from Seattle to New York City to Chicago to Orlando, they are all being extremely flexible. So, but they're not going to come to you. You've got to go to them. So I would get ahead of it and get together with your sales contact and say, my meeting for 2021, and this is true, I think, to the end of 2021, it's not going to look the same way that you contracted it. It's not, because nobody could have predicted this. So renegotiate those terms. Either find out if they're willing, especially first quarter, to completely forgive guest room attrition and food and beverage performance. That would be a definite, like first quarter business. If you're willing to do it, if you're willing to do a hybrid event, they should not be holding you to any sort of guest room attrition or food and beverage performance. Past first quarter, it's kind of iffy. So some people are doing 50%, some people are cutting the food and beverage, in half, 75%. I would just push the hotel, find what the solution is for your organization. What would be acceptable? What are you comfortable with? And that's what I would ask. I wouldn't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So I would go back to the hotel and, if that number is 30%, then present them with 30%. Maybe they come back with 50 and you can meet in the middle. But just don't be shy from that. And then always get it in writing with an addendum. All of a sudden, that salesperson who said yes to you, even though it's in an email, goes away. And all of a sudden, senior management says, well, we didn't approve that. So always make sure you get that in an addendum. So cancellations and force majeure. This is also a quote. This is a quote from Steve Rudner, and he's a well-known hospitality attorney. And this is something that I am coaching my clients through every single day. So for 2021, we'll just focus on that because I think very little is happening in 2020, and they're all small sizes, like I said, 50 to 150. Force majeure does not cover us right now in 2021. It just doesn't. There's nothing out there, no state, city, federal regulations that bar meetings from happening in 2021. There's lots of different opinions on this, and I am simply going by fact. I see both sides. I listen to my client's viewpoint and their legal department's viewpoint, and they see it very differently. The force majeure was really put in place after 9/11 when you physically you can't go to a meeting. Example of force majeure right now is, if a hotel, due to social distancing, if they don't have a space large enough to accommodate your contract because of social distancing, then yes, that would be force majeure because you cannot hold it in their facility. But if they can, then it doesn't fall under force majeure. So what does that mean? Obviously we're still in a position where you really can't hold your meeting. It might not be profitable for you to hold your meeting. There might be lots of questions as far as, is it safe to have your meeting? And if you have your meeting and people get sick, what does that mean for the reputation of your organization? So what can you do to limit cancellation has to occur when it doesn't fall within force majeure. The very first thing is to fully understand if you're sitting here today and you want to cancel a meeting that is in March, understand what tier of cancellation you are in your contract and what that total amount is. Don't forget taxes. Cancellation, unfortunately, is taxed. Understand what that total liability is to you. And then determine with all of your stakeholders what is an acceptable outcome for your organization. That might be zero. I'm not saying that, that you're okay with paying any cancellation, but come to an agreement on what is acceptable and maybe what is your ideal, what is your acceptable, and what is your absolute max. So when you go to negotiate, you understand what everybody is saying at the same time. The worst thing that can happen is for you to go and strike a deal with a venue or a hotel and then bring it back and then somebody throws you a curveball. And every time you send that salesperson back to their team or even their executive team, they lose a little bit of credibility. So get it all on the line at first and understand what needs to happen. This next one I can't stress enough, and it's, I think we absolutely overuse the term partnership, but in this case, it is really true. The only way that I was so successful in saving my clients a lot of money, especially my two top clients, is they have a huge amount of partnership and loyalty to hotel chains and hotels that work for their events that happen every year. Doesn't mean the event goes there every year, but it might go there every 2 years, or it might go there every 3 years. And when you have that kind of loyalty, hospitality industry is huge for thinking about long term. They are willing to give up short-term money if that means that you're going to be with them for 3 or 4 times in the near future. So that's really huge. And I've really kind of coached my clients through, this doesn't fall in force majeure, but you know what? We have a lot of history with this particular hotel, great partnership. We have events booked out in the future. We have to use that key, and it's been extremely successful. Another thing that is really good, so if you need to have a cancellation, are you a member or know of an organization that would consider contracting this venue for a future date? Maybe it's not your organization. Maybe it's your significant others, or maybe it's your sibling, or that they're a part of an organization that you might be able to strike up a conversation. Would you be interested in a future date? Might not be in 2021, but maybe 2022. We use this all the time in my business. This is one of the aspects of working with an intermediary that can be beneficial. So I can reach out to a team of mine. There's probably 400 of us in sales, and seeing, does anybody have anything that's going to the Hyatt Regency Seattle in the near future, would consider it. I will say that, success rate, I want to say probably is about 20%. So it's not, 100%, but 20% is better than nothing. And it's worth a shot in trying. So the next thing also is you're going to start with the person that negotiated the contract with you, if they're still there, or whoever your new sales contact is. But continue to get others involved if you are not satisfied with your progress. It is my job for my clients to make all this okay and come to an acceptable solution. But there are many times that I have to get multiple levels in the hotel and in my client's organization involved to reach an acceptable solution. It's really interesting how all of a sudden, if you bring in the vice president of the group, and all of a sudden the hotel is actually listening, right? Doesn't happen often. Normally, on that first level, you can get things in an acceptable solution. But if you're not getting the results that you need, don't be afraid to get others involved. And, in the next one is really kind of the same. Anybody who is a stakeholder in a cancellation liability, get them on the same page now. You don't want to do this alone. This is not fun. You want to make sure that you communicate on every different level, what stage you're at, what you're seeing. Put your heads together and see how you can go about it maybe a little differently to get a better outcome. So next thing, what should you have in your future contracts? This is an interesting one. I just did a contract last week where the legal department was very heavily involved for 2022. And the items that are coming out on a legal end are some of the most unprecedented contract items and language that I have never seen hotels agree to. They're agreeing to it. So that's the good news. As I said earlier, if you don't ask, the answer is always no, right? So never be afraid to ask. But some basics that you should have in your future contracts: all liability, whether it be guest room attrition, whether it be food and beverage, whether it be cancellation, should all be based upon lost profit. If you're not there at the hotel, there's nobody that you're not using the front desk, the rooms aren't getting cleaned, food and beverage isn't being prepared, food and beverage isn't even being ordered. So why should you pay your food and beverage minimum or a percentage of that based upon your cancellation if the food never was ordered to begin with, right? So lost profit, that's a big one. Resale clauses, you want to have in your resale clause, if you cancel an event, the hotel should not invoice you until they submit their city ledgers. City ledgers are what they submit to their states in order for tax purposes. So they can't fudge it, right? So if they resell those rooms, then you are not liable. Guest room audit, you absolutely want to have this in your contract, because anybody who is there that might have booked through Expedia, Priceline, through their own corporate channels, every room night should be accounted towards your attrition. Another one too is guest room attrition should always be cumulative, not per night. So if I'm your attendee and I'm bringing my family down to Disney and I stay 5 nights ahead of time and 5 nights after, then those 10 nights should be applied to your overall numbers. So make sure that that small word is in there, and you'd be surprised, hotels do not kick that back. I want to say the only ones, and we have our templates with Vegas hotels, so it's not a problem with merits, but if it's just a one contract with a corporation, Vegas hotels always have per night in their contracts. So just be aware of that and always ask for it. Base your contracts always on history, even if a hotel is pushing you to increase your room nights or increase your food and beverage. Why would you do that? Maybe put in a clause where you could, if you're booking further out, you could evaluate it a year out. Always make sure you get in there that fees added after the contract execution can't happen. Like if a hotel doesn't have a resort fee, they can't all of a sudden just put a resort fee. Energy surcharges, cleaning fees, all of that stuff. And the big must-have, force majeure. So we are going to see this change tremendously, I think, over the next 6 to 9 months. But right now, that doesn't really help us because there's no real industry standard that is out there that has changed. This force majeure changed a lot after 9/11 and has kind of been in there since, as is. But things that are really going to be in there that you're going to want in there is inadvisable. Illegal and impossible should already be in your force majeures. Another one that is really good is commercially impractical. So my business to business clients that, they have to market, they have to ramp up. If they're going to go virtual, they can't do that within a month, right? So if they can't have a live event because people aren't going to come, it's commercially impractical for them to have that event. That's going to really play a big part in moving forward. And you also want to get in there the percentage of attendees that are affected that cannot attend the event. If you rely upon a global audience and people can't enter our borders, but people within the US can, go to different meetings and whatnot, that percentage is going to be important for you. Travel warnings are starting to be included to force majeure. So like I said, this is really going to change quite a bit within the next 6 to 9 months. Who should review a contract? Everyone is what I want to say. The more eyes, the better. When I do a contract for my client, now my client always signs the contract. I do not, but I negotiate it with the hotel. I sit down with them face to face and we go through page by page. And I encourage everybody that has a stakeholder in event liability, the event director, operations, managing director, executive director, legal department, get those eyes on the contract. I can't tell you, even when we do get everybody involved, there might be something still that we all miss. So the more eyes on a contract, the better. And then what I also feel is that if more eyes are on a contract, then nobody's going to come back pointing the finger at you for doing the contract, right? You're all in it together. You all reviewed it. We're all in it together. It really is the best way to go about it. So notes, new terms and clauses are bound to be addressed after COVID-19. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll have another webinar once some of this stuff gets sorted out and kind of some new things that really the industry is seeing. One of the biggest things that I always say in regards to a contract, if it is not addressed in a contract, it is left up to interpretation. So the example that I put here is if a hotel says, we don't need to put an attrition clause in your contract. If it doesn't state a clause saying in there that that guest room block is an estimate and you are not guaranteeing that block, but you will do everything you can to promote it, if that clause isn't in there, then you're 100% liable for your block. So most attrition clauses are anywhere from 80 to 90%. That's better than being 100% accountable. So make sure that, you know, even food and beverage, if a food and beverage is not clearly spelled out, they could go back to the agenda and they could take each line item in that agenda that has food and beverage attached to it and calculate that, and you'd be responsible for 100%. So one of the things that I just want to put out here, I deal with a lot of contracts. I've been with Experience going on 17 years in November, and many, many years in the hotel industry before that as the director of sales and marketing. So one of the things that we offer any of our clients, any potential clients, a complimentary contract review, or if you don't want a total contract review, a review of specific clauses. This is something that is completely complimentary. It comes with no strings. You don't need to sign anything. It really is to help share knowledge. Our company was founded years and years ago by the first person who ever did third-party meetings, Bruce Harris with Confron, and he was such a huge believer in giving back to the industry and in knowledge and just spreading the word. So that's my email address. If anybody wants to take me up on that, you are welcome. Just reach out to me and we can schedule time to begin the process. So one of the things I thought might be helpful, and we're about wrapping up here, this is pretty much almost the last slide, is what am I hearing from hotels? Basically, if you're willing to have a meeting live or hybrid, they will forgive guest room attrition and food and beverage well into 2021. Push for it, ask for it, get ahead of it now, get it in an addendum, so you don't have to be sitting there, you know, worried about registrations and marketing, and you can take those two components, which are huge, off your plate. You don't have to worry about them, and you can just focus on having a successful meeting, which is going to be hybrid. Shifting first quarter events later in 2021 or future years. I am seeing some charging small cancellation fees. I think that the only cancellation fee that one of my clients had to pay was $40,000 for two different events. So it's 20 and 20. And that was because they were going into 2021 and one was going into 2022. A lot of hotels are waiving it. Just push it. You don't take, if they say that they want to charge, just continue to push them and see what happens. Some are flexible in changing force majeure wording and some are not. Get executives involved because the sales manager does not make this decision. So you really want to make sure that you don't stop there. Your sales manager is your absolute best advocate. That sales manager wants to book you for future years, right? They want you to be a long-term client. So they are willing to go to bat and do whatever it takes. Capacity, social distancing, food and beverage, decisions are made jointly with the client. They, of course, have to adhere to any, state, government, federal laws as far as how many people they can have in a certain room. But if they're not going to tell you that you need to have 1 per 6 foot. As long as you fit within the guidelines of the room, those decisions are being made. So don't feel like you're going to be pushed into making decisions that's not going to work for the event. Labor costs affiliated with all these new measures. I know this was the biggest question I had back in April and May as we were starting to push things forward, is who's paying for this? Because I need to make sure that all of a sudden a month out, my client's not being hit with all these extra fees because food needs to be prepackaged, or there needs to be a server at every chafing dish in a buffet line and plexiglass in front of it. Like, who's paying for that? The hotels unanimously, I've not heard one hotel be different or one bad story from a colleague. The hotels are incorporating that cost. They just want to get back to doing business. If this is a long-term thing and these things stay in place, then I am sure th- those costs will be passed on in some form, as we all know. But for right now, for the short term, and short term, I really mean through the end of 2021, you should not see any sort of increases from this. Bottom line, hotels will do almost anything to get back to having face-to-face meetings. That is really the takeaway. They want their housekeepers back. They want their front desk associates back, their bellmen back. They want their sales teams back. A lot of hotel sales teams only have one person working, and I'm sure you guys are dealing with that because it's really hard to get connected with somebody who can cancel a meeting or postpone a meeting. And you're dealing with people that don't know your event at all. So they just want to get back to doing business and have face-to-face meetings. So that pretty much wraps it up. Any sort of questions?
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Kelly, for a terrific presentation. We really appreciate it. And now we are going to turn to some questions from the audience. So, Monica, if you would, please, could you let people know how to ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the Q&A window in the top right-hand corner of your computer screen. Type your question in there and click Enter. Thank you.
Okay, great. And before I do that, just a note to make sure that you pick up on some of the upcoming events that are going to be happening. They're right here on the screen with links, and you'll get those in your slide downloads when you download the slides either after the event or later on. So, okay, Kelly, are you ready for a couple of questions?
I am.
All right. So the first question is, as an event organizer, what should I be worried about in my future contracts?
So as I had already stated, the biggest thing that you're going to want to be worried about is liability and what your sets are going to look like, right? So liabilities, go after those hotels and connect with them now and find out what is their expectation when it comes to your guest room pickup, your food and beverage spend. What can you do to kind of come to a common ground where you're both comfortable. But then you also really want to take a look at, what is your realistic expectation? How many people do you think are going to be live to this event? And do the rooms that you have, can they accommodate those number of people with social distancing? Like, how do you want that to really look? Like, there's going to have to be a lot of thought that's put into that. But I think that those really are kind of the two biggest things that you're going to want to make sure that you discuss with the hotel sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked, how do we access the takeaway sheet you referenced? Or is that what we're going to be sending to everyone later, or is that something else?
I believe it's going to be sent after the call, or you'll be able to download it along with this presentation.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're going to send a couple of additional pieces of information, a couple of additional PowerPoint slides to everyone when we get the link to the recording. So you should get a whole bunch of additional information that Kelly has put together for you. All right, next question. We're already seeing increases in food and beverage on menus for 2021. I know these are incorporating the increased cost for PPE, servers, et cetera. After hearing you say no costs will be passed on in the immediate future, do you think we can further negotiate these costs?
I would absolutely negotiate those costs. In all the hotels that I've been working with for 2021, that the clients are having meetings, and these are events that are happening right in New York City, Chicago, big city marketplaces that you would expect maybe for them to have a price increase, and they're not. So that's where going back to your salesperson and engaging them, and the conversation just needs to be really blunt. If they want to partner with you and help you have a face-to-face slash hybrid event, then they're going to have to work with you to make sure they're not blowing your budgets, right? Nobody caused this, but we all got to work together as a team with it. I have not gotten any pushback. I probably do about 25 events a year, and I have not heard from any of those hotel partners that I've been working with that they're increasing their menu prices. This has also been a huge topic of conversation within our company and our company calls and our regional calls, and even the calls that we have with Michael Dominguez. And Michael Dominguez, like I said, he's the president and CEO of Alhi, which is Associated Luxury Hotels. And all of his hotels are incorporating the cost to those. So if there is like a one-off or two-off hotel that is not taking that stance, I would really push them hard, and and obviously partner with them, and realize that if you're going to take the chance to have this, then you need to make sure that your costs are not increased. But like I said, long term, if this stuff stays in place, if this is what our new world is going to look like, then absolutely, I don't think that the hotels could continue to absorb all that cost. But to all of a sudden increase those costs 6-9 months out is not, it's not realistic. It's not fair to you.
Okay. Next question. We have a conference scheduled for November 2021. It drew 1,700 people in 2019. How do you recommend negotiating the food and beverage and attrition charges if we're going at them now?
So I would start the conversation, and I always like to put it on the hotel first. I don't ever go back to them with an expectation first, because sometimes they'll come back with a better deal than what is in our minds, right? So I would start those conversations and literally just say, we both know this event is not going to look like how we contracted it, right? So what is the hotel's stance as far as guest room attrition and food and beverage? And let them go back to their team and come back to you, right? So we just did this. I just did this with the Hilton New York for an event that is supposed to be in January. We moved to May. They didn't charge us any sort of cancellation fees moving to May, and they completely waived all guest room attrition, all food and beverage, and basically said, we want you here. And this client's been a client of them for a long time. Like, we've had our event there, I think probably 8 years. So I think, use that as leverage and just see what they're willing to come back. My goal would be like minimum 50%. 50% cut your food and beverage, 50% attrition. I think that's a safe bet. You might reference a couple, I think it was one of the first slides actually, where the Star Corporation, the Star Report is anticipating by the end of 2021, we should be back to 80% of where we saw in 2019. That's data related, but I think the biggest thing we need to keep in mind is nothing about COVID is normal. Nothing that we've seen in the past. So I think in keeping that in mind, be a little bit more aggressive. And if you can get that at 50% or completely waived, like that's, push for that first. And if not, I think 50% is a safe bet.
Right. Next question. Is there any cause for concern about a hotel's financial stability, and what happens if they close?
So this is a big concern. We're hearing about hotels every day. So the Hilton Times Square is closing their doors, right? So any events that you have in 2021, if you have not connected with that hotel, get connected, because you don't want to be in a position where you want to have this meeting. It might not be the same attendance as it was in 2019, but you really want to have a face-to-face with a virtual option, the hybrid model, and then all of a sudden realize 6 months out that that hotel is closing, right? So, and the biggest challenge with that, if your hotel it closes, and if you need any sort of large meeting space, all of 2020 events got moved to 2021 and 2022. The availability out there for hotels right now is slim. It is slim pickings. So you risk the opportunity where you might have to go somewhere you don't want to go, right? Maybe a different city you don't want to go into, or so if you reach out to them now and stay in constant contact, Google that hotel, on a, I don't know, every couple weeks, a monthly basis, really to kind of stay on top of it.
Okay. Next question. What if we disagree with the hotel on things like social distancing and PPE and all that?
So if you disagree with the hotel, where I think the hotel is going to be more on the strict end, right? So they're going to be following it to what they've experienced from other clients. But every hotel that I have worked with and what I've been hearing from my colleagues is, as long as it falls within government guidelines and you're not breaking any laws, that you can determine how you want to social distance. You can determine how that room looks, right? So if you go back to that slide where that biotech company, purchased all those, like basically those little individual pod chairs that had tables with them, you could do that. Or there's a slide in the takeaway with the visual for events where you've got a 6-foot table and somebody is all the way to the right and then somebody is all the way to the left, but on the side of the table. So I think you're going to find that the hotels are going to work with you as long as they're not breaking any laws. They want you to feel comfortable.
Okay, next question. I have a contract with a housing agent that just ended. They actually have built in a small commission for events that take place in the future. I'm moving 2 of my shows to different quarters in 2021. I have to renegotiate the entire room block, new dates, block rates, etc. So does this negate the commission I'm supposed to pay this agent for the previously negotiated contracts?
So depending upon what you mean by contract, if you have a contract directly with the housing company, then that really is between you and them. So when we do housing, Merritt's has a housing division. It's built into our contracts with the hotel. So once an event cancels, then that commission is canceled. If an addendum is done, then the commission stays put, right? Because the only thing in an addendum is the only thing that changes from the original contract. So because most of the time the hotels pay the commission for the housing company, so that's why it's in the hotel contract. So if that's how it is and you cancel that contract, then that commission would be canceled.
Okay, next question. You referenced that hotel availability could be slim pickings at this point. If we are still debating an early summer event for 2021, would you recommend contracting or holding until we know more about what the event climate will be at the time?
So I would recommend to contract because you will be in jeopardy of losing your space. And then the question will be, can you find space? Everything data is leading towards that once, first quarter is over, meetings are gonna, they'll start to happen in first quarter and then they'll start to ramp up after that. So I would definitely recommend to contract if it doesn't go that way, and who knows, nobody has a crystal ball, and we're still in this position, hotel stances aren't going to change. So if we're still in a position where we can only have 50 to 150 people at a meeting and they can't accommodate it with the social distancing, you're still going to fall under force majeure at that point. As long as that's what the current guidelines are. Now, if it's a June event and it's March and there's nothing saying that June can't take place, it doesn't fall under force majeure. But if it says, if you have a May meeting and it's March and they say, okay, we can't hold your May meeting, obviously it would fall under force majeure.
Okay. Next question. Should small conferences of 50 to 75 look at university space instead of hotels?
I would not. I do not think universities are equipped to handle meetings. Your hotel partner, especially if you stick to the major chains, right? You get your Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, Omni, Fairmont, Marriott. They have been doing so much work behind the scenes since this whole thing started. They have it down to a science. So if you're looking for the safest way to hold a meeting, I would stick to the hotels.
Okay. Next question. With social distancing, what happens if the contracted meeting space can no longer accommodate the attendance?
So that's going to be a decision for the organizer, the event organizer, right? So in keeping in mind, what how your attendance is going to change. It's going to go down because some people are just going to go virtual, which is definitely the case. Um, if it still cannot accommodate, even with your projections of your attendees being down, then the hotel has to let you out of that contract because they can't put off the meeting, right? They can't physically do the meeting and social distance as long as it's by government regulations. So if you have an idea of what social distancing is, but the government is saying, so if you think you don't want any more than 50 people in a given room, but the government is saying in this particular city, in this particular hotel, you could have up to 100 people in this room, but you disagree, then that's a complete negotiation. But if the hotel cannot accommodate more than 50 in a room with the social distancing guidelines from the government, and you have more, then you can get out of that contract. Now, of course, you're still going to have to do a new contract with a new hotel. So the ideal would be to work it out with that hotel and come to an acceptable solution.
Okay. That was our last question for today. So I wanted to thank you, Kelly, for answering all those questions. That was great. And to thank everyone for the questions that they sent to us and for joining us today. And Kelly, again, thanks so much for a terrific presentation. We really appreciate the time that you put into putting this together. We would very much like to get feedback from the audience on today's event. So very shortly, you'll be getting an invitation to complete a survey about it. If you would, please take 2 minutes to let us know what you thought of this webinar, as well as provide any suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover or speakers that you'd like to hear from in the future. We're working on our next webinar and should have a topic and date announced shortly, so watch your email in the coming days. To exit this webinar, simply close your browser window, and if you're on the phone, you can hang up your phone. Thanks again for attending today's webinar, and have a wonderful afternoon.